In this video, we're going to use the monocentric model to explain rural-urban migration. Since this happens mostly in the developing world, then in the text, Jan Brooker calls it cities in developing countries. So here we go. We have two income levels. One is the agricultural income and one is the urban income. Let's suppose that the agricultural income is lower than the urban income. But think about it. The agricultural setting will have no commuting costs. So this is assuming that the farmer just wakes up, turns around, and you have the cornfield right there, and you can start working. However, the rural resident will move to the city when Y pays for commuting and for urban housing. And since the utilities are uniform all over the city in equilibrium, then we can compare the utility of agricultural person with the person that lives in the edge. And it's exactly the same as if we compare it with the utility of any other person living in the city. So let's talk a bit about the assumptions of the model. If you recall, from the budget constraint of the consumer, this is the disposable income. Y minus the commuting cost. And with this, the consumer will be able to buy bread and housing. But right now, we need to compare the income in the city with the income in the rural area. When the income in the rural area is lower, then the people will start migrating to the city until we reach a point where Y agricultural is equal to Y urban minus the commuting costs, where T is the commuting cost per mile, and X bar is how many miles you have to commute. And if you are in the farthest part of the city, then you have a commute equal to X bar. So remember from last module that we derived that population and distance are positively related. When the population grew, we needed a bigger city to accommodate the people. Therefore, X bar, the edge of the city, is a function of population. This was one of the questions in the homework, and you must have concluded that with a higher population, that the distance in the farthest end is bigger. Now, when L is the perfect size, we are in equilibrium. That means that the income from agriculture is equal to the income from the urban setting minus the commuting costs. And in this case, then there's no rural-urban migration. Okay, suppose we have a low income from agriculture. Let's suppose agriculture is having a low productivity season. Now, to reach equilibrium, Y minus Tx bar of L must also be small. This means that X bar, depending on L, the distance that depends on the population, must be large. So we must have a large population. So in a country with low rural income, rural-urban migration will not stop until the city has reached a large population size. This large population means a longer commute. And if you have a longer commute, then this number grows, and therefore you have a lower disposable income. This will push the standard of living down to the rural level to even both incomes. Therefore, this model predicts that developing countries with low rural incomes will have especially large cities, and in the end, both incomes will be equal. Let's explore a little bit more the relationship with population. With this model, we can also analyze the effect of the city's income and the cost per mile on the equilibrium population. What we're going to find is that cities with higher income or with low commuting costs will attract a large number of migrants and therefore making the population large. To prove this, let's simplify our lives. Population density will be constant across locations within the city. There will be one dwelling size and buildings will be the same height. Now, individual land consumption then can be just a number. Let's call this number 1 divided by mu. Then this means that the land of the area of the city will be mu, acres per person, times the population. And therefore, we can derive the radius of the city. The radius, the area given by these, pi times x bar square, will be equal to land area of the city. And from here, we can solve for x bar. So if we divide by pi and then take the square root, this would be x bar. X bar, if you recall, is the location of the farthest house from the center. Now, the migration equilibrium condition is this: y minus t times x bar must be equal to the income from the agricultural sector. Let's analyze a little further this equation. Okay, here it is. In this equation, it's easy to see that if y increases or the commuting cost decreases, then for this to be an equality, it must be the case that L increases. So if y increases, L must be bigger for this to be the same. Pi is given, mu is given, so the only thing that can change is the population. Same thing with commuting costs. If we have lower commuting costs, for this to still be an equation, then it must be the case that L increases. Now let's talk about the model by Harris and Todaro in 1969. They explain the persistence of migration even when there's unemployment in the city. Basically what they said, unemployment is not the key. Even if the people earn zero income, they keep coming. How come? Well, because the expected income is the relevant variable. It's not the actual income, but the expected income. So if the expected income in the city is bigger than the rural income, then people will keep migrating. And let's prove this very easily with this model. Suppose the number of jobs is fixed at J, and each job will pay an income given by Y. Now the probability, the chance of getting a job is J divided by L. How many jobs divided by how many people there are. And now the income will not be Y, but Y times the probability that you get the job. So it would be Y times J divided by L. And that is the expected income. So if we go back to our equilibrium condition, we just substitute instead of the Y, Yj divided by L. Now let's analyze this little equation. So check this out. If we have a more population, then the welfare of the people will be decreased in two ways now. Not only they will have a longer commute, explained already last module, but also they will have a lower expected income because L decreases the probability of getting a job. Okay, so that's one effect. The other effect that we observe is same as at the beginning. When we have an increase in income or a decrease in commuting costs, in equilibrium, L must grow to offset this benefit. But here's another one. If J, the wage that it's paid, increases, then in equilibrium, the population will increase as well. And this is a very neat result because basically it's saying very intuitively, if you increase the wages in a given city, then people will come and migrate to the city. Very natural conclusion. I know you're very busy. And the following is a 2-minute video where someone summarizes a movie written by Alfonso Cuarón, where he describes the story of a rural-urban migrant, which is his nanny. So this is viewed from the privileged perspective of the person who hires the migrant, but it reminds you what happens and how people's lives are touched by this migration. I'm sure you might have so many other stories that you know about, but this in particular, is in a developing country that the textbook it's very keen to talk about. So, here it is.
It's largely based on his childhood memories and is described by Alfonso as an intimate portrait of the women who raised him in a recognition of love as a mystery that transcends space, memory, and time.
It's a film about a family, a city, and a country, but ultimately it's about humanity.
One was to do a film about Cleo, the real life Cleo, that the process was going to be through memory. In other words, is to recover those moments, shooting in the actual places and the actual spaces. And the other thing was going to be in black and white.
The character of Cleo is based on Alfonso's childhood housekeeper, Libo Rodriguez. They auditioned thousands of actresses before finding Yalitza Aparicio. She was chosen by Alfonso because she not only physically resembled Libo, but also captured her nurturing maternal presence and conveyed a level of vulnerability that the role needed. Because Alfonso was after authenticity, every decision made during the production was a conscious effort to preserve that authenticity, which included returning to his hometown of Roma in Mexico City, filming on the same street where he grew up, at the school where Libo would pick him up every day, the cafe where Libo would eat on Sundays. Every location in the film was either the original place from his memory or a detailed reproduction. For one scene, that meant recreating 5 blocks of Mexico City exactly as it looked in 1970. As for what exists within the frame itself, it was about presenting an objective viewpoint. It's a ghost of the present visiting the past.
And at the end, existence is nothing but a shared experience of loneliness.
Traditionally, cinematography decisions are meant to guide the eye to whatever is most important. So by placing the camera further back and filming with a wide lens, it puts everything into focus, giving everything significance. And the choice to shoot in 65mm grants a sense of scope to the film not typically found within such an intimate story. Beyond recreating visually Mexico City as it was in Alfonso's youth, there was great care to recreate the city as a soundscape. From the sounds of birds, the bustle of traffic, the whistle of street vendors, all of which are greatly detailed within the screenplay, add another dimension to the film, bringing us deeper into this vivid reproduction of the city as Alfonso remembers it. To take on so many roles, to tell such a personal story and create an experience that has profoundly affected so many people whose lives bear very little resemblance to Cleo's. It's a film that explores the implicit relationship between the individual and the external forces that surround us, how the politics of a time and place shape our lives in ways that we could never predict, how race and class discrimination inform our roles in society and how others perceive us. The inherent inequality present in any society where we see such privilege contrasting such adversity.
Mexico is a country in which it's impossible to go through Mexico and not to see contradictions all the time, to see the most amazing, beautiful places and the most beautiful expressions of generosity together with misery and atrocity.
We are all victims of circumstance, the forces that are outside of our control, but we can carve out our own narrative in the face of adversity to find some happiness between the moments of chaos. We just can't do it alone.